There is a specific moment in every deep spiritual journey that no book warns you about. It is not a moment of light, nor is it a moment of peace. It happens when you have meditated long enough, prayed hard enough, or pushed your consciousness far enough to finally reach the edge of your known reality. You stand before the gates of higher wisdom, expecting to be greeted by angels, guides, or a blinding white light. But instead, you find something blocking the way. A figure stands in the doorway. It is shadowy, grotesque, and terrifyingly familiar. It does not speak, yet it knows every secret you have ever kept. It knows every lie you have ever told yourself in the mirror. It knows the shame you buried in childhood and the arrogance you hide behind your spiritual practice today. You try to push past it, but it does not move. You try to fight it, but it only grows larger. Picture this. You are standing in a long, ancient corridor. At the very end lies the Hall of Amenti, the source of all universal knowledge that Thoth spoke of. The door is open. The golden light is spilling out. But directly in front of you stands a beast that seems to be stitched together from your worst nightmares. This is not a demon sent by evil forces. This is not a punishment. This is the most misunderstood entity in all esoteric history. The Rosicrucians called it the Dweller on the Threshold. The ancient Egyptians knew it as the monster Amit, the Devourer. Thoth, in his emerald tablets, warned of the Hound of the Barrier that guards the pathway to the soul. Most seekers, when they encounter this entity, turn back in terror. They think they have encountered evil, so they retreat to the safety of their mundane lives. But they are wrong. They have not met a demon. They have met themselves. And this encounter is the single most dangerous point in your evolution. If you turn back, you remain asleep. If you fight it, you will be consumed. But if you know the secret password, the key of humility that we will decode today, you can dissolve this beast into pure light. Before we unlock the first seal and teach you how to face the guardian without fear, if you are one of the few who refuses to turn back at the threshold, please click subscribe and turn on notifications. You have found your sanctuary here. Welcome to the mystical journey. To understand why this terrifying entity exists, we must first dismantle a popular lie. Modern New Age spirituality often sells you the idea that the universe is nothing but unconditional love, a playground where you are free to roam wherever you please. They tell you that all is one, and therefore you have access to everything right now. This is a dangerous oversimplification. The universe is indeed love, but it is also law. Consider this. Would you let a toddler play with a loaded weapon? Would you give the nuclear launch codes to someone who cannot even control their own temper? Of course not. Power without maturity is destruction. The universe operates on this exact same principle. The higher dimensions of consciousness, the realms of Thoth, the Akashic records, the causal plane, contain power that can manipulate reality itself. If a human being enters these realms while still full of jealousy, hatred, greed, or a massive ego, they wouldn't just hurt themselves. They would become a cosmic cancer. They would wield the power of creation to amplify their own dysfunction. Therefore,
The universe has installed a safety mechanism, a filter, a firewall. This is the guardian of the threshold. It is not a separate being waiting to attack you. It is an energetic feedback loop. Think of it as a mirror that has come to life. As you approach the gate of higher consciousness, the light of that dimension shines upon you so brightly that it casts a shadow behind you. But in the spiritual realm, shadows are not empty shapes. They have weight, they have density, they have form. The guardian is the accumulation of every unresolved vibration you are carrying. It is built from the debris of your past lives, your repressed emotions, and your spiritual pride. The universe is essentially saying to you, you cannot pass until you deal with this baggage. You cannot bring this trash into the holy temple. Most people never see the guardian because they never get close enough to the gate. They live their entire lives in the safe, low-frequency zones of the material world. But you are watching this because you are pushing for more. And because you are pushing, the guardian has awakened. It stands there to ensure that only those who have truly mastered themselves can wield the power of the adept.
Let us dissect this entity. What is it actually made of? If we were to perform a spiritual autopsy on the guardian, what would we find inside? This is where we must bridge the ancient wisdom of Thoth with the modern genius of Carl Jung. Thoth called it the darkness of the self. Jung called it the shadow. Jung realized that human beings are not single, unified minds. We are fragmented. We have a persona, the mask we wear for society, the good person we pretend to be. But for every trait we show the light, we push an opposite trait into the dark. You show kindness, but you repress your aggression. You show piety, but you repress your lust. You show humility, but you repress your desire for power. Now imagine a trash compactor in your mind. Every time you refuse to acknowledge a dark thought, you throw it into the compactor. You think it's gone. You think you are cleaning your mind. But energy cannot be destroyed. Down in the basement of your subconscious, that trash is rotting. It is fermenting. It is gaining a life of its own. Over decades, or perhaps lifetimes, this repressed energy coalesces into a semi-autonomous entity. This is the guardian. It is the spectral self. When Thoth warns of the watchers or the hounds, he is using a metaphor for this psychic decumulation. The guardian looks monstrous because your repressed trauma is monstrous to you. It looks angry because you have aggressively ignored it for years. In the ancient Egyptian judgment of the soul, this was depicted as the weighing of the heart. The initiate's heart was weighed against the feather of Ma'at, truth. If the heart was heavy with sin, heavy with the density of the shadow, the monster Amit would devour it. This wasn't a punishment from a god, it was a law of physics. Density cannot rise. Heavy things sink. The guardian is simply the weight of your own heart, taking a physical form to stop you from rising higher than your frequency allows. It is the ultimate test of integrity. It asks you a silent question. Are you actually holy, or are you just pretending? If you are pretending,
the Guardian will tear your mask off. But here is the twist that most seekers miss. Because the Guardian is made of your energy, it is intimately connected to you. It feeds on your reaction to it. Every time you fear it, you feed it. Every time you try to banish it with a ritual or a sword of light, you are actually giving it more reality. You are saying, "You are a monster and I must fight you." This validation is exactly what it craves.
What happens when a traveler refuses to heed the warning? What happens when a seeker, driven by impatience or arrogance, tries to sprint past the Guardian without resolving their inner shadow? This brings us to the most tragic chapter of spiritual history, the madness of the return. In the ancient mystery schools of Egypt and Greece, initiates were often kept in waiting for years. They were tested, humiliated, and purified before they were ever allowed to enter the inner sanctum. Today, in our world of instant gratification, people tried to bypass this process. They use powerful psychedelics, forced Kundalini breathing techniques, or high magic rituals to storm the gates of heaven. Consider this. When you force your consciousness open before your nervous system and your morality are ready, you do not bypass the Guardian. You merge with it. If you carry unhealed trauma or a hidden desire for superiority, and you touch the high voltage current of the astral plane, that current amplifies everything inside you. Your small human ego is blown up into a cosmic proportion. You don't become enlightened, you become inflated. Carl Jung called this spiritual inflation. It is a state where the ego identifies with the archetype of God. We see this all the time. The guru who starts a cult and abuses his followers. The prophet who claims they are the only one who can save the world. The seeker who loses their mind and ends up in a psych ward ranting about demons and conspiracies. These are not people who failed to find the light. These are people who found the light, but were burned by it because they did not respect the Guardian. They tried to sneak their garbage past the cosmic filter, and the filter rejected them. Thoth describes this in the tablets as being lost in the dark curve. When you hit the barrier with force, you bounce back with equal force. You are thrown back into the lower vibrations of fear and paranoia. This is why so many people who dabble in the occult without discipline end up worse off than when they started. They wake up the dragon, but they don't know how to tame it. The Guardian is the fail-safe. It ensures that if you are going to go mad, you do it here on Earth, where the damage is limited, rather than up there, where you could damage the fabric of reality itself. It is a mercy disguised as a curse.
So we arrive at the central paradox. If we cannot run from it, and we cannot force our way past it, what do we do? The instinct of the warrior is to fight. We have been trained by movies, video games, and even some misguided religious teachings to view spiritual life as a battle. We are told to rebuke the darkness, to slay our demons, to cut the cords. But applying this logic to the Guardian of the Threshold is a fatal mistake. Picture this. You are standing in front of a giant mirror. In the reflection, you see a monster attacking you. You panic. You punch the mirror with all your strength. What happens? You shatter the glass. You cut your hand, and you bleed. The reflection didn't feel a thing. The Guardian is composed of your energy. It is made of the very same substance as your soul. When you attack it with judgment, with fear, with banishing rituals, you are essentially attacking yourself. You are feeding it. Remember, the Guardian feeds on density. Violence is dense. Fear is dense. Anger is dense. When you scream at your shadow to go away, you are pouring high-octane fuel into its tank. You are validating its existence. You are making it real. There's a law in physics. Action and reaction are opposite and equal. But in the mental plane, this law works slightly differently. Resistance creates persistence. What you resist persists. What you fight strengthens. Many of you watching this have felt this in your own lives. You try to stop a bad habit, but the more you hate yourself for doing it, the stronger the urge becomes. You try to silence a negative thought during meditation, but the harder you push it down, the louder it screams. You are fighting the Guardian, and the Guardian is winning because it knows all your moves. It is you. So if the sword is useless, and the shield is heavy, and the spells don't work, what weapon is left? The answer lies in a frequency that the Guardian cannot digest. It is a frequency so light, so transparent, that it passes right through the monster's skin. Before we reveal the specific key of silence that dissolves the Guardian, a technique used by the ancient masters to walk through the fire unburned, take a moment to check your connection to this channel. If you are ready to stop fighting and start ascending, make sure you are subscribed. Now, let's unlock the gate. So how do we disarm a bomb that is rigged to explode the moment you touch it? The answer lies in one of the most counterintuitive secrets of Hermetic alchemy. Thoth whispered it, the Buddhists practiced it, and Ishak Bentov proved it with the mechanics of consciousness. The key is radical neutrality. You do not fight the Guardian. You do not run from the Guardian. You simply witness the Guardian. Consider this. When you encounter a terrified, screaming child, do you scream back at them? No. You hold space. You remain calm. You let them cry until the energy runs out. You must treat your own spectral self with the same dignity. The technique is known as the gaze of the Sphinx. When the monstrous form of your guilt, your fear, or your unworthiness rises up to block your path, you must stand your ground. You must look it directly in the eye, not with anger, but with absolute, cold, clinical curiosity. You say to it, I see you. I acknowledge that you are a part of me. I am not afraid of you, and I do not judge you. This sounds simple, but it is the hardest thing a human being can do. It requires you to stop identifying with the drama of your life. When the Guardian whispers, you are a sinner, you do not argue, you simply observe the thought. When it screams, you will go crazy if you go further, you simply observe the fear. In that moment of non-reaction, a miracle of physics occurs. Because you are no longer feeding the Guardian with the energy of resistance, it begins to starve. Its dense, dark form starts to lose cohesion. The monster begins to dissolve. And then something even more profound happens. As the darkness breaks apart, the energy trapped inside it is released. Remember, the shadow is just trapped light. When you accept the shadow, you reclaim that light. The guardian undergoes a metamorphosis. The monstrous form shifts its shape. It stops being the dweller on the threshold and transforms into the angel of the presence. The very entity that was blocking your way now turns around, opens the door, and bows to you. It says, "You have passed the test. You may enter." This is the secret that the mystery schools hid for thousands of years. The guardian is not there to stop you. He is there to ensure you are strong enough to carry the light. He was never your enemy. He was your trainer. He was holding your power for you until you were mature enough to claim it. Once the guardian steps aside, the threshold is crossed. This is not a physical step, but a shift in the geometric structure of your consciousness. You move from the dualistic world, where there is me versus the universe, good versus evil, into the realm of unity. Thoth describes this in the Emerald Tablets as entering the halls of Amenti, the place where death has no power. But in modern terms, we can call it the 0 point. It is the state where the observer and the observed become one. When you walk through that gate, you realize the ultimate joke of the cosmic game. You realize that there never really was a gate. There never really was a guardian. There was only you. You were the traveler. You were the monster blocking the path, and you were the destination all along. The struggle was a necessary illusion. It was the friction required to polish the diamond of your soul. Without the guardian, you would have remained a rough stone, dull, unformed, and asleep. The resistance gave you shape. The darkness defined your light. So the next time you feel that rising panic in your meditation, or that sudden wave of imposter syndrome in your spiritual life, do not turn back. Do not medicate it away. Do not distract yourself with the noise of the world. Stop, breathe, look into the dark. Smile at the monster standing there. He has been waiting a very long time for you to finally recognize him. And when you do, he will hand you the keys to the kingdom. The door is open. The threshold is right here, right now, in the silence between your thoughts. Step through.